All right, welcome everyone. My name is Wendy Castle with One Bite Nutrition. I'm a dietitian and diabetes care and education specialist. We've got Nikki Bomar here with us. She's one of our incredible dietitians, and we're continuing on our hormone series. So the next hormone we're going to talk about is insulin, one of my favorite hormones, being a diabetes specialist. But Nikki, can you kind of tell us what insulin is?
Yeah, so again, one of our favorite hormones, right? This is probably the one we talk about the most.
Mhm.
But our insulin's that hormone that's produced by the pancreas that helps us regulate our blood sugar. So after we eat, the glucose enters our bloodstream. Insulin acts as a key, allowing that glucose to move from your blood into your cells where it can then be used for energy. So without insulin, our blood sugar would be really dangerously high.
Yeah, without insulin and without allowing it to get into the cell, your body is essentially starving. So you really, it's essential. So
Mhm.
with that next question, what is insulin bad? I mean, some people are like, "Oh, when I take insulin, I gain weight." Like, why is it perceived as bad?
Yeah, so like you said, insulin is essential for life, right? It keeps our blood sugar within a safe range. It allows our body to use those carbohydrates for energy, which is their preferred source. It helps store energy that we can use it later. So if I'm not eating, like per se, overnight, that's why our blood sugar doesn't get dangerously low because we can use that. And insulin, like it acts as that key to help us use it. And of course, it plays a role in muscle building and repair as well. So the issues people run into is insulin resistance. Our body, maybe it makes insulin and enough insulin, but our body can't use it. And of course, that chronic metabolic dysregulation, overarching of everything, can cause a lot of issues there too.
Yeah. You kind of said a trigger word, and some people might have heard this word before, but insulin resistance.
Yeah.
That's kind of associated with pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. How does insulin resistance play a role?
Yeah, so this happens when those cells don't respond efficiently to insulin signal. So insulin's trying to act as that key, but our cells just aren't listening. So this is going to result in the pancreas producing more because our blood sugars are still high, so it thinks we need more insulin, but those blood sugars still remain high no matter how much insulin it makes. Over time, this again increases our risk for prediabetes and then type 2 diabetes as well. So again, this doesn't happen overnight or anything. This usually develops gradually and it's influenced by things like genetics, sleep, stress, activity, and then of course nutrition patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. Insulin resistance is usually associated with weight. If you have a lot of adipose tissue, it makes insulin resistance worse. The beta cells in your pancreas are the ones producing insulin, and if we make them work overtime, a lot of times they'll start to burn out, and that's where you see that's why it's such an issue that the pancreas is producing more insulin. Is you don't want to burn out those beta cells because once they're gone, they're gone. So, how does insulin cause weight gain? Can you kind of explain that?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this earlier, but this is probably one of the biggest myths in nutrition, right? We hear this all the
Mhm.
time, just like you said. So it helps store energy, right? But it doesn't independently cause weight gain. If I have too much excess energy, like I'm overeating, I'm eating a lot of extra carbohydrates in particular, it's going to store that as energy. Like you said, increase in adipose tissue, especially. So when the energy intake consistently, get that word, consistently exceeds our energy expenditure over time. So chronically high insulin levels can make fat loss a lot more difficult, especially when we have, of course, the insulin resistance. But that insulin itself isn't, again, the enemy. Again, I don't think the biggest overarching goal of the hormone series is knowing that no individual hormone is our enemy here. Um, but just like that, the insulin and the carbohydrates, they don't automatically cause the weight gain.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about balance and it's really individualized. That's one of the hardest things I have when I talk to patients. They're like, "Oh, just tell me." And I'm like, I mean, I need to know a little bit more because everybody is different. It's really in relation to what you're eating and how active you are and what in unintentional activity and other genetic and metabolic effects you have going on how the energy or how much, food you should be eating and how much you should be expending, like how much activity you need if you want to eat X amount of food. So that brings us to the next question. So, what happens to insulin after we eat?
So want to keep it really simple here, right? So we eat a meal, our glucose rises, insulin's released, our cells absorb the glucose for energy. If we have any extra or excess, it's going to be stored as glycogen. That's going to be in our liver and in our muscles. Blood sugar returns to baseline. This is the normal, healthy response. Of course, different things can cause an issues with that. That's our ideal response.
Yeah, and what about different foods? Like how do different foods affect insulin?
Yeah, so insulin response is definitely going to depend on our carbohydrate type, the fiber content, how much protein and fat did I have with it, what was my carbohydrate portion size, and then of course our individual metabolic health. Right, protein can stimulate that insulin as well, which again usually surprises people.
Mhm.
Um, but a balanced meal, we're going to have carbs, we're going to have protein, we're going to have fat. This is going to help moderate that blood sugar response.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I know this is kind of going on a tangent, but one thing that we're seeing with individuals that are on GLP-1 medications, um, semaglutide or trizipatide, is, their appetite's low and they're trying to get in the smart carbs, but they're not getting enough fiber. And
Mhm.
so it's really kind of causing some ruckus in regards to that. So yeah, balanced meals, containing all of those things, and if having your fiber is a type of carbohydrate, so the carbs that you do have, you want to make sure that they're higher in fiber. So if somebody is kind of predicting that they might have some insulin resistance, what are some things that they could look for?
Yeah, so signs to look out for, of course, that elevated fasting blood sugar. That's one of the number one things and first things that we see. High fasting insulin as well. That's a less common test.
Mhm.
But if that fasting blood sugar is high, sometimes we can say, okay, hey, let's add this test to it. Increased abdominal fat, skin darkening around your neck can happen. If you're really tired after meals, that's a big sign that even if you don't think you have something going on with your insulin or with your blood sugar, as dietitians, that's usually the first one we see, like, okay, red flag. Your triglycerides, that's part of your cholesterol panel, that's going to be elevated. And of course, just getting proper lab testing is going to be needed, whether it's through your dietitian, your doctor, whoever it's through. We usually want that testing just to check out what's going on.
Yeah, one thing that I really encounter a lot with some of my male patients, and I'm not calling out guys, but I'm kind of calling them out, is that they don't go for their yearly physicals unless they
Mhm.
have to, like if they have a CDL or something. And so they're not getting that routine blood work drawn to check for some of this stuff. So then we're seeing late diagnosis of, full-blown diabetes. So, if you fall in that category, even if you're female, if you fall in that category and you have some of these symptoms and you haven't had an annual exam with your primary care, make sure you get one. If you're shy going to the doctor, I know some people have white coat syndrome and they're like, I'm not going to the doctor unless I absolutely have to. Your health department can run blood work. They have health fairs that there's different seasons. It's not so much in the summer. I think it's usually in the spring and the fall, but they have different health fairs where you can get blood work drawn. But again, if it's out of range, you definitely want to follow up with a physician. So yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Um, can stress, well, yes, I'm gonna give it away. Can stress affect insulin, or how does stress affect insulin?
Yeah, so good. It can increase that cortisol, right? Which we have at series two.
Mhm.
Raises that blood sugar. Again, the chronically elevated cortisol is going to really take an impact to that insulin resistance over time. That sleep deprivation. So a lot of times with that increased cortisol, we have lower sleep. That's going to also decrease or reduce our insulin sensitivity. So even short-term poor sleep can have really big effects on our insulin.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know, Nikki, with your two baby girls, your sleep is definitely influenced right now.
Extra hit.
Hopefully for the short term. Come on,
I
girls.
hope so too.
So how does exercise impact insulin?
Yeah, so it can actually improve insulin sensitivity. So when our muscles are working during activity, they absorb that glucose without needing as much insulin. So when you talked about the insulin being the key, I don't need as much to unlock that key. Both resistance training and aerobic are beneficial, or movements are beneficial here. So when we look at activity, we want a mix of activities, and that physical activity is a vital part of that metabolic health.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I worked at the hospital, I worked with a exercise physiologist, and one of the things that she had told the patients, but I also learned that day too, was, and I mean, I kind of knew this, but like your muscles don't work for free. Like they need
Hmm.
energy. They need hormones to be able to access the energy. Your body doesn't run on nothing. So you've got to make sure that you're fueling it with the proper food so that your body and your muscles and your activity, everything is running as optimally as possible. Um, so, in regards to diets,
Hmm.
should everyone go on a low carb diet to control their insulin levels? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so probably get asked this at least once a week as a dietitian, but the answer is not necessarily, right? So reducing the types of carbs, so refined carbohydrates can benefit us, but extremely low carb diets aren't where we want to go. So I always say, okay, carb consistency, that's what we're going for there. So again, overall diet quality is going to have an impact. Our making sure we have fiber. So again, those carbs, again, fiber is a type of carb. Do I have it in there? Protein with my meals, consistent meals. Again, we talked about fasting a little bit. This is a huge one here. And of course, that physical activity. I also look at, okay, when am I doing my physical activity? Like, of course, for some people, it only works to only do it at a certain time throughout the day. But can I move my meals and snacks around to get the most benefit out of this? And then, of course, sleep and stress regulation. It's going to play a big role, but that nutrition advice should really be individualized for people. So that's why we can kind of say, okay, here's, our baseline for carbs, but we got to move it around based on what your body's doing and how it's reacting.
Yeah, absolutely. And in regards to activity, that's one thing that you mentioned. Ideally, if we can be active after a meal, our body is able to
Mhm.
uptake that glucose from our meal and use it right away. Our muscles use it right away versus it going to storage and pulling out of storage. So, if we're active, and I was guilty of this too, just because this is the only time I could be active is when I worked at the hospital. I'd wake up real early, I'd work out, and then I get my day started, and then I have breakfast. But it's not ideal because your muscles aren't fueled. You're fasting. You don't have anything readily available, so your liver's pouring out all this glucose to help fuel the situation because you haven't ate. So long story short, ideally, if you can be active after meals, that's the preferred time. But honestly, if it's a make or break, be active whenever you can. But if you have the flexibility to choose when you're active, preferably after meals. Um, and then carb amount, yeah. So one thing that I always get that too, talking to my patients that have diabetes is, how many carbs should I be having? It's very individualized. Super low carb diets can be a helpful tool for some people. Some people get really cranky on them and don't do as well. But it's all about, we have different tools in the toolbox. We've got
Mhm.
diet, we've got activity, we've got stress management, we got hydration, we've got medications, like it's what tools and how many tools you want to use and at what level. So it's never a one solution fixing every problem.
Exactly.
Yep. So to kind of leave everybody with some helpful information, what would you say is the biggest myth about insulin?
Yes. So I definitely think that, okay, insulin is solely responsible for obesity. I think that's a big one. There's a huge link there, especially in society today. But right, metabolism is really complex. The hormones all work together. And hopefully if you've watched most of this series or listened and watched most of this series, you've seen that, right? Insulin, cortisol, leptin, ghrelin, our thyroid hormones, and so many more. They all work together. And so oversimplifying insulin as the villain really ignores the full picture there. So one isn't to blame, it's getting the balance of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. If there was one set thing that fixed everybody's problem, I don't think there would be an obesity crisis. We could figure that out.
Oh yeah.
The problem is there's so much playing a role in tying together, and it's so individualized based on the person and their genetics and their environment and everything else that it's, you know, it's complex. There's not one solution for everyone.
Mhm.
So yeah, thank you so much for going through with that information with us, Nikki. Really appreciated that. If you haven't checked out the other part of this series, we have a full hormone series going over multiple different hormones and how it affects people, how they feel, you know, their weight, energy levels, all of that. So check that out on our YouTube channel. We also have a really cool recipe database. So if you're looking for some cool meal ideas, go to our website, onebitenutrition.com, and go to our recipe database, and you'll find a lot of different ideas on there. If you want to get in touch with one of us, same thing. You can talk to us directly through the website, or you can comment below.